single mother dances for an Arab billionaire to save her son, but discovers a shocking secret before we begin the story. Let us know in the comments which city are you watching from. Enjoy the story. Elena Carter sat in the dim hospital hallway, gripping the crumpled medical report in her trembling hands. Her son, Liam, needed surgery immediately. Without it, he wouldn't survive. But money was a cruel barrier. She had begged, borrowed, and pleaded, but the amount required was impossible for a struggling single mother. Her options? None. Until now. Elena's fingers tightened around the paper as she stared at the address scrawled on the back. The Mirage, an exclusive underground club, a place where powerful men sought entertainment, where fortunes changed hands over a single glance. Tonight, she would step into a world she didn't belong in. Tonight, she would sell her dignity to save her son. Taking a shaky breath, she pushed open the heavy doors and stepped inside. The moment she entered, opulence swallowed her whole. The scent of aged whiskey, expensive cigars, and money filled the air. The lighting was low, intimate, casting golden hues on velvet-draped walls. In the center of it all, a grand stage stretched before the elite, where dancers swayed like sirens luring men into the deep. Elena forced herself forward. She wasn't here to seduce. She was here to survive. But as she approached the backstage area, a voice made her freeze. "You're new." She turned slowly. A man leaned back in a leather chair, watching her with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. Zayed Al-Malik. Even without an introduction, she knew who he was. Arab billionaire. Ruthless. Untouchable. And tonight he was watching her. His gaze didn't linger on her body like the other men in the room. No, his dark eyes studied her like a puzzle, as if he already knew what she was here for. Then, with one simple motion of his hand, he gave his command. Dance. Her fate had just been sealed. Elena's heartbeat thundered in her ears as she stepped onto the stage. The air felt suffocating, thick with the scent of cigars, whiskey, and raw power. She wasn't like the other dancers. They moved with practiced ease, trained to seduce, to entertain. She wasn't here to seduce anyone. She was here for one reason only: Liam. The music started. A slow, haunting melody. She took a deep breath and moved. Her steps were hesitant at first, but as the beat grew stronger, so did she. She let go of everything: the shame, the fear, the judgment. Each movement was raw, vulnerable, desperate. She wasn't performing for pleasure. She was fighting for her son's life. Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment, picturing Liam's face. This was for him. And then, she felt it. A gaze. Not just anyone's. His. Zayed Al-Malik. His stare burned into her, intense and unyielding. While others whispered and smirked, he didn't move, didn't blink. He wasn't entertained. He was studying her. The song ended, leaving the room in silence. Elena stood there, breathless, her pulse racing. Then, a single clap. Zayed. Slow. Calculated. His dark eyes never left hers. He leaned forward slightly, murmuring something to a man beside him. Moments later, a club employee appeared at the edge of the stage. "Come with me." Elena's breath caught. This was it. Her life was about to change forever. Elena followed the club employee through the dimly lit corridor, her hands clammy, her pulse erratic. The muffled sounds of music and laughter faded behind her, replaced by an eerie silence that made her stomach twist. What had she just walked into? She was led to an exclusive VIP lounge. Lavish, dark, intimidating. And there, sitting with effortless dominance, was Zayed Al-Malik. He didn't acknowledge her immediately. He took his time, swirling his glass of scotch, his fingers tapping against the rim as if deep in thought. Finally, he looked up. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Elena hesitated, but something about the weight of his gaze made disobedience impossible. She lowered herself onto the plush leather chair opposite him, her back straight, her defenses up. Then he spoke, his voice smooth yet edged with power. "You need money. I have money. Let's make a deal." Elena's breath caught. A deal? Her mind raced. Had she just made a terrible mistake? What kind of deal? she asked carefully. Zayed leaned forward slightly, his dark gaze locking onto hers. I'll pay for your son's surgery, every penny. In return, you will stay with me for 1 month. 1 month? Her stomach twisted. She didn't know what that meant, what he truly wanted. But the weight of her son's life bore down on her. What do you mean, stay with you? She whispered. Zayed tilted his head, his expression unreadable. I don't need a mistress, if that's what you're thinking. But I do need something from you. Elena swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But where would she go? Liam was running out of time. With a shaky breath, she lifted her chin. Fine, I'll do it. A flicker of something, satisfaction? Amusement? Crossed Zayed's face. Good. You belong to me now. The next morning, a luxury car waited outside her tiny apartment. She stared at it, disbelief coursing through her veins. This wasn't real. Couldn't be. But then she thought of Liam, pale and weak in his hospital bed. She took a deep breath and got in. When they arrived at Zayed's estate, her breath hitched. It was not a house, it was a kingdom. Massive iron gates opened to reveal an architectural masterpiece. A mansion fit for royalty. Guards lined the entrance. The scent of exotic spices filled the air. And at the top of the grand staircase, Zayed stood, watching her. From this moment on, everything you do is under my control, he said. A shiver ran through her. Had she just sold her soul? Days passed, and Elena felt the walls closing in. Zayed dictated everything, her schedule, her wardrobe, even her meals. She had a private suite, but security ensured she never left the estate without his permission. He tested her patience, pushed her boundaries, watched her like a hawk. But the strangest part? Zayed wasn't cruel. He was distant, calculating, but never inappropriate. And yet he watched her too closely, like he knew her, like he had been waiting for her. And deep down, Elena knew this wasn't just about a deal. It was about something much bigger, something she wasn't ready to face. Elena had been inside Zayed's mansion for a week, but she still felt like an outsider, a prisoner in a golden cage. Everything about her new reality was surreal. The luxury, the servants, the carefully curated silence of the estate. It was nothing like the struggling life she had known. Yet, something was off. Zayed knew too much about her. At first, she thought it was just him being calculated. A billionaire would naturally have resources to investigate anyone before making an offer like this. But then she noticed the small, unsettling details. He never asked about her past, he already knew. He called her by her full name, including a middle name she never used. Once, she caught him speaking to one of his men in Arabic. She only understood one word, her son's name. And then there was the locked room. The east wing of the estate was always empty. The house staff never went near it. And whenever she walked past, she felt the heavy presence of security cameras watching her. One night, curiosity got the best of her. She crept through the dimly lit hallway, her bare feet silent against the marble floor. The door stood at the end of the corridor, imposing, untouched. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle. Would it be locked? She turned it. Click. It wasn't. She pushed the door open, stepping into the dark, airless room. And that's when she saw them. Photos. Dozens of them. Scattered on the desk. Framed on the walls. Some old, some recent. All of her. Childhood photos. Her high school graduation. Even a picture from the hospital the night Liam was born. A chill ran through her. How did he have these? Her hands shook as she picked up a photograph of her as a little girl, playing near a river. She couldn't have been older than 7. And beside her, in the photo, a boy. Elena's breath caught. The boy in the picture had dark hair, piercing eyes, and an unmistakable presence. Zayed. Her fingers went numb. No, this wasn't possible. A shadow moved behind her. She spun around, her pulse spiking. Zayed stood in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, his gaze dark, intense. You shouldn't be here. Elena's breath hitched as she clutched the photograph in her trembling fingers. This couldn't be real. She looked at the picture again. A younger version of herself, smiling, innocent, standing beside a boy who now stood before her as a billionaire. Zayed. She slowly lifted her gaze to meet his. His expression was cold, but his eyes burned with something deeper. What is this? Why do you have these? Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but it carried all the weight of betrayal. Zayed exhaled, stepping into the room, his powerful presence making the walls feel smaller. I was going to tell you, but I needed time. Tell me what? That you've been watching me? That you knew me all along? His jaw tightened. Yes, I did. The confirmation sent a sharp, twisting pain through her chest. That doesn't make sense. I don't remember you. I don't remember any of this. Zayed's gaze flickered to the photo in her hands. Because you were taken from me before you could. Elena shook her head, stepping back. What are you talking about? Zayed walked to a small wooden box on the desk and opened it. Inside was an old silver locket. He picked it up and turned it toward her. You wore this every day when we were children. Elena's heart pounded. She had seen that locket before, in dreams, in flashes of memories she could never fully grasp. But this wasn't a dream. This was real. Zayed's voice was quieter now. Your family worked for mine. You and I, we were inseparable, best friends. But one night, your mother took you and ran. I never saw you again. Her vision blurred. Why would she run? Why would she take me away? Zayed hesitated for a long moment before he finally said, because she was afraid. A chill ran through her. Afraid of what? His eyes darkened. Afraid of what I'd become. Elena felt her entire world tilting, the ground beneath her suddenly unstable. Her past wasn't just lost. It had been taken from her. But why? And more importantly, what else had been hidden from her? Elena's breath came in sharp bursts as she struggled to process Zayed's words. Her mother had taken her away. From him? From this life? Why? You're lying, she whispered, shaking her head, her hands gripping the locket tightly. None of this makes sense. Why wouldn't she tell me? Why wouldn't I remember? Zayed's face remained unreadable, but his voice was calm, firm. Because she didn't want you to remember. His words settled like a stone in her chest. Why would her own mother erase an entire part of her life? You're saying I belong to this world? To your world? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zayed took a slow breath. You belonged with me. Her stomach twisted. She had spent her entire life fighting for survival, struggling, scraping by, and all this time, the truth was buried in a past she never knew existed. But then another thought hit her. If Zayed knew, why hadn't he told her sooner? Her gaze sharpened. Why now? Why find me now, after all these years? Zayed didn't answer immediately. His silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. And then he said, because I needed to know if you were still her. The girl I once knew. Something in his voice, a quiet vulnerability, made her chest tighten. But before she could respond, a loud crash echoed from outside. Then a gunshot. Elena gasped as she turned toward the window, her pulse spiking in fear. Zayed was already moving. His composure snapped like a switch flipped. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her behind him. Stay close. Do not leave my side. Before she could ask what was happening, his guards stormed in. One of them spoke urgently in Arabic. Zayed's jaw tightened, his grip on her arm firm but protective. You need to leave. Now. What? Who's attacking? Elena demanded. His face darkened. Someone who wants to use you against me. Her blood ran cold. She had come into Zayed's world to save her son. But now, she was in the middle of something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Zayed grabbed her hand. There's no time to explain. You either stay with me, or you won't make it out of this alive. Elena's pulse pounded. She had a choice to make. Stay or run. But something deep inside her knew. This wasn't just about her anymore. It never was. Elena's mind raced as Zayed's grip tightened around her wrist. Everything was happening too fast. Gunshots echoed outside. Shouts in a language she barely understood filled the halls, and the weight of her choices crashed down on her. She had thought this was just a transaction, A deal made in desperation. But it was so much more. Now, she wasn't just fighting for her son. She was fighting for her life. Zayed's voice snapped her back to reality. You need to trust me. His dark eyes locked onto hers, fierce, unwavering. If you leave now, they will find you. And they will use you to destroy me. Elena's chest tightened. She didn't want to be a pawn in whatever war was happening around them. But more than that, she thought of Liam. If something happened to her, who would be there for him? She had no choice. Taking a deep breath, she made her decision. I'll stay, but you have to promise me. No matter what happens, my son comes first. Zayed's gaze softened for the first time that night. You have my word. And just like that, Elena Carter sealed her fate. The chaos had passed, but its shadows remained. Elena stood on the balcony of Zayed's estate, the warm breeze brushing against her skin. She had survived. The threats, the secrets, the truth. Everything had changed her. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into the mirage that night, desperate and afraid. She had fought, she had sacrificed, and in the end, she had won. Behind her, Zayed approached, his presence as commanding as ever. Yet there was something different in his eyes, something softer. Your son is safe. The best doctors are with him. You don't owe me anything anymore. Elena, you're free. She turned, searching his face. She had expected a deal, a transaction. But instead, she had found something deeper. Why did you really help me? She asked. Zayed's lips curled slightly. Because I never forgot you. Tears burned her eyes, but for the first time, they weren't from pain. Life had taken everything from her, but it had also given her something back. A second chance. A new beginning. And maybe fate had brought her exactly where she was meant to be. Elena thought she was walking into a deal that would change her son's fate. But in the end, it changed hers too. Fate, secrets, and redemption brought her back to a past she never knew existed. And to a man who never stopped searching for her. Speech balloon, what would you have done in Elena's place? Would you have trusted Zayed or walked away? Let us know in the comments below. Fire if you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Your support helps us bring more emotional and gripping content to life. See you in the next one. Movie camera sparkles.